Welcome back, everyone. We're Simply Bitcoin. We break down the news, the daily fail, meme review, software releases, hardware releases, and the pleb sites. Joining us today, fellow Bitcoiner, miner, and the only team member for Brain Systems out of the U.S. I'm talking about Zack Voell. Zack, thank you very much for joining us on the show, man.
Thanks for the invite. Glad to be here. Excited to talk with you guys.
Very cool. All right, well, you're in for a treat. We are diving into the numbers. Let's do it.
Number time. Brought to you by Nodl. They make some of the best Bitcoin nodes, like the Nodl Dojo, the one I'm holding in my hand. It's in red. That means it's faster. Run your own version of Bitcoin Core and the Lightning Network, all in the comfort of your own home. Remember, guys, if you don't run your own Bitcoin node, you're trusting someone else's. That's a big no-no for privacy. So get yourself a Nodl Bitcoin node today.
At the time of this recording, the block height is 738,910. The Bitcoin price, 29,680. Chain rewrite days, 767. Total public Lightning capacity, 3,908.18. Moscow time, 3369. Blocks to the halvening, 101,090. And the Samurai Whirlpool unspent capacity. Samurai Whirlpool is a coin join or collaborative spend. It is not a mixing service. And the unspent capacity for that pool is 4,771.31 Bitcoin. Nico, yeah, it's the same numbers again.
It's the same numbers, bro. It's just... I think the block height is really the only thing that changes. Anyways,
Bitcoin Lightning kind of moved by like 7 BTC
true.
Overnight.
It's true. Bitcoin is the new stablecoin. Anyways, so I spoke yesterday at the first South Florida meetup. Shout out to Greg Zack. He's the one that organized it. And Bob put together this game that he made me play. And it was called Corrupt or Incompetent. And essentially he would go through a specific politician or someone important, and he would say, Nico, is this person corrupt or incompetent? I want to play that game today on Simply Bitcoin. So check this out. Let me pull up this Bloomberg article. Yellen admits that she was wrong last year on the path of U.S. inflation. And this is what she admitted on CNN. I was wrong about the path of inflation would take. Yellen said in an interview that aired Tuesday on CNN, there have been unanticipated and large shocks to the economy that have boosted energy and food prices, supply bottlenecks that have affected our economy badly, that at the time I didn't fully understand. I'm calling BS, and the reason I'm calling BS is because there's no mention of we printed too much money or nothing. Again, she's blaming something else. And you know how the deal is, guys. Simply Bitcoin brings the receipts. Put the politics aside. But RNC Research did a great montage of every single time the government officials were saying that inflation wasn't a thing.
I really doubt that we're going to see an inflationary cycle.
Most economic analysts believe that it will have a temporary or transitory impact.
The faster than expected increase in some of those prices is actually a good sign.
The overwhelming consensus is going to pop up a little bit and then go back down. No one's talking about this great,
This is something that will settle down.
Transitory.
And the data shows that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and are expected to be temporary. There's nobody suggesting there's unchecked inflation on the way. It's highly unlikely that's going to be long-term inflation that's going to get out of hand. I don't know anybody who's worried about inflation.
Over the last couple of months, we actually saw it trended downward.
President Biden's chief of staff, Ron Klain, enthusiastically retweeted an economist who had said in part most of the economic problems we're facing, inflation, supply chains, et cetera, are high-class problems.
What is the Granholm plan to increase oil production in America?
That's getting into the oil part. I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole other rabbit hole. Anyways, point is, okay, put the politics aside. You guys know the deal here. We are apolitical on Simply Bitcoin. We don't lean left or right. We don't support either political party. We support candidates that support Bitcoin. That's the only thing we really care about. But anyways, in terms of the inflation aspect, and that's the thing I want you guys to focus on, I think it's gaslighting. I think it's total gaslighting. Look, the M2 money supply chart, that's public information. Bitcoiners were screaming there was going to be inflation all of 2021, right? You increase the money supply. Historically, that always happens. This time is no different. So I'm going to pass it on to Zach. Is Janet Yellen corrupt or incompetent, or both?
True. I was gonna probably pick a both option if that's one of the cards to play. I think like she's retired, so she doesn't have much of a incentive in any of this besides just her reputation. And you never see like actively employed politicians coming out and saying they're wrong.
I mean,
on
but
stuff.
she's the Treasury Secretary. Did she retire?
I'm pretty sure she retired. I could be wrong.
She was the head of the Federal Reserve, and then she became the Treasury Secretary, which is actually a really important position.
True. Well, then I'm wrong on that. I guess like she's one of the outliers in terms of public servants coming out and saying she was wrong. Yeah, she resigned from the Fed board in 2017. It's definitely unusual. I don't know if she's. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with my answer for both. I don't know if she's exclusively corrupt or incompetent, but definitely a mixture. Definitely a mixture of both. And the corruption element probably isn't like some, malicious scheme. It's just misrepresenting facts and data and just a general failure to do her job that comes from something besides, sheer incompetence. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Phil, corrupt or incompetent?
Yeah, you know what? I gotta go middle of the road with Zach here. I'm gonna say corrupt and incompetent. But to Zach's point, right? It has to do. I believe it has to do with the broken incentives. People who have worked in large corporations have probably experienced this, where you're asked to do something that is correct for the corporation, but that is actually most likely the incorrect thing to do for your customer. But you have to do the right thing for the corporation. It's the same type of situation with, people like Janet Yellen, where at the end of the day, they got to do the right thing for the rent seek. And that may mean not telling the right thing to the public. But what's completely hypocritical in all of these situations is that we are both people. We're the public and we're the corporation. So just lying to ourselves. So yeah, I'm going to say middle of the road.
Okay. I would totally just say, the thing is, and I said this yesterday, like at this meetup, I think that in her eyes, she's doing the right thing, right? But I think that the fiat system is architected in such a terrible way that her doing the right thing is just, it hurts millions of people. But then at the same time, you could make the argument that it's corrupt, because there's no way. Look, you can't say Janet Yellen is stupid. Okay, you can't say that. She's obviously highly educated, crazy, backgrounds, obviously highly accredited, if that means anything nowadays. And yeah, like it's I don't think it's rocket science. They must have knew that printing this record amount of money would have had catastrophic effects, specifically on the lower and middle classes. And if you remember a part in that video, they totally gaslit, and they were just like, inflation is a high class problem. Absolutely not. Inflation benefits the high class because most of the high class have their wealth parked in assets, whether that's real estate, whether that's equities, and that benefits from asset inflation. So the rich get richer with inflation, and the poor get significantly poorer because they don't have the means to save in equities and real estate. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Zach?
I think you're definitely spot on there, and most people don't appreciate like how small the sliver of a population that rich who are getting richer really is. I saw some banter on Twitter about, or actually you mentioned at the top of the show too, how people living on like $250K a year are living paycheck to paycheck. They're like, most of their net worth isn't parked in assets. They're still like, people making 30K or like nearly 300K are all living paycheck to paycheck without much of a cushion to sort of absorb these inflationary pressures. And that's not like a recipe for a long-term successful economy. Things are, more likely than not going to get kind of rough. And that's a huge swath of the population there, like everyone earning 30K to 300K. who like don't have that cushion to absorb more inflation. And like maybe inflation has peaked. I'm not really going to speculate on that, but it's definitely not going to reverse course rapidly anytime soon. So going to be a lot of pain, and most people can't really absorb that, which is just perfect setup for a huge mess.
Absolutely. Phil, does Bitcoin fix this?
I think Bitcoin does fix this, but I just want to make a point about the inflation being a high class problem. To your point, that just made absolutely no sense, and it's complete gaslighting. And as we've shown on multiple occasions, right? We've shown on multiple occasions that the inflation actually hurts the poor first and foremost and the worst. So it's just absolute nonsense. So I really do think that Bitcoin fixes this. But to Zach's point about the people earning 250K, it's going to sound cheesy, but people, we all should be living below our means, number one, and number two, that's kind of the problem, right? When it comes to this, is that it's not about how much you make. It's about how much you save and what you do with the money that you make. Because there are people out there who make $500,000 a year and are living paycheck to paycheck, and that's just sad. I mean, look, if they know that if they don't know that they could be living life differently, okay, then it's a tragedy. But if they do know, then I guess it's their choice, I guess they like the struggle. Maybe they enjoy the adrenaline. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I do think that Bitcoin fixes this because it does retrain us to think in some way, and it introduces this low time preference, which most people don't know. And then when you explain it to them, it's like, oh, that makes sense.
Yep.
I got to take a step back and look. Anyways.
Absolutely. I think it's just the incentives of fiat incentivizes you to spend, whereas the incentives of Bitcoin incentivizes you to save. Like, it's just as simple as that. I think a lot of people are still stuck in the fiat matrix, but hopefully those things will change soon. Anyways, Phil, it's time for
The Daily Fail, brought to you by Swan. Check them out, swanbitcoin.com. That's right. It's the best way to build your Bitcoin stack with automated Bitcoin savings plans. You can dollar cost average instant purchases. They're coming out with an app. It is a Bitcoin stacking site by fellow plebs. The link is down below. All right. We got it's kind of a commentary on the Celsius fail, but then we also have another really interesting piece about Web3 and Mark Andreessen and A16Z. But first, we're going to dive into this tweet just quick, see if anybody has any comments on this. At Nunya Business, fellow Bitcoiner who does Bitcoin and put this out there. I'll just leave this here, then, shall I, sir? What's he talking about? He's talking about a tweet from Vlad, fellow Bitcoiner, Vlad Costilla. Here we go. Let me get this straight. People were able to figure out that the CEO of Celsius had dumped lots of Cell tokens because of an NFT profile picture, which links to one of his wallets. Talking about Alex Mashinsky, who's the CEO of Celsius. Holy shit, you can't make this up. Okay, now look, Corey has been dismantling Celsius in the last 2 weeks. It's been Corey Clipston, who's the CEO of Swan, has been absolutely dismantling Celsius in the last 2 weeks. That's right, Nico, I'm doing the sign. There you go, making everyone happy. Okay, but look.
Swan.com/simplybitcoin. Go right now.
Go right. So look, for the people who don't know, right, what Celsius is, it's a investment, Bitcoin investment savings platform. You move your Bitcoin there, you lose complete control of your keys and your coin. And for that really small amount of risk.
You mean what Celsius is? You just said
what Celsius is. Yeah, not Swan. We're talking about Celsius. Okay? I'm just giving people context of what Celsius does. Okay? So they claim it's a small amount of risk, right? And you get this percentage, which you get to see every week. So if you put in Bitcoin, you get a certain amount of Satoshis every week. If you put in some other shitcoin, you get a certain amount of percentage of that shitcoin every week. But the reality is that you're handing them your Bitcoin. You have absolutely no idea what they are doing with it. And this tweet from Vlad, I think, is absolutely hilarious that they were able to figure out that the tokens were dumped all because of this guy's NFT profile picture, because it all linked back to the same wallet. So maybe this teaches everyone a lesson in OPSEC, okay? if you're gonna do something like this, okay, and you're gonna be a scammer, or you're gonna dump your bags, you may not want to use the same wallet that's gonna link back to your profile picture so that people can't put the two and two together and figure out that you're dumping on the bag holders. All right, like I feel like he could have done these people this service. Alex is not a stupid guy. Supposedly he created VoIP, voice over IP. I've never checked that, but he claims to have created VoIP. Anyways, Zach, I don't know if you know what's going on with Celsius. It's a huge mess on Twitter. But do you have any thoughts on this before we go to Nico?
So I followed it loosely. I think like it is pretty funny, and there are just so many bad OPSEC stories of like specifically NFT holders linking things and just forgetting about everything else that's linked to whatever NFT wallet or particular profile picture avatar they're broadcasting, or in many cases for one particular type of NFT project that I'm not going to name, but their holders are infamous for just giving away their keys and just losing everything. And a whole range of other fails in between. It's pretty amusing. Like also, kind of sad. Like you never want to wish someone to lose like all of their money, but also like how are you going to learn without messing up at least once or twice? And in this guy's case, like often it's better off that he made this OPSEC fail for everyone else's benefit. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just funny, and these stories just keep coming.
That's a very good point about his OPSEC. Absolutely right. People, the smartest people learn from others' mistakes. So, very well put. Nico.
Yeah, first of all, shout out to Corey. Absolutely destroying, the shitcoins. I think him and Phil are competing for the title of the ultimate shitcoin slayer. Phil had Phil was first place, and then Corey just came out swinging out of nowhere, just destroyed Plan B, destroyed Celsius, destroyed Luna, just dropping nukes. Phil, you're under pressure, bro.
I'm under serious pressure,
So and
this
then
is my
that
segment.
and then that makes me kind of think like, is it the old trope, right? The old thing that we always say in Bitcoin. Do you change Bitcoin? Bitcoin changes you. Is it a coincidence that the CEO of a Bitcoin exchange, right, that actually incentivizes you to take self custody? Does it you know what I'm saying? Is it a coincidence that CEO happens to be the most toxic CEO on Bitcoin Twitter? I don't know, man. That's maybe it's Bitcoin working its magic on Corey. Maybe it's just Corey. I don't know. But yeah, man, that's my thoughts on this. I think Celsius, just very simple. Not your keys, not your coin. Simple
Bingo.
as that.
Exactly. Just remember, once you move it to their platform, it's not yours. All right, moving on. Let's dive into this. We've got some really interesting. So this is actually going to tie in the beginnings of the internet. For the Gen Xers who were here before the internet, you saw what life was like before all of this connectivity. You saw what happened as we began to connect. You saw all the bullshit that came about, the sites and the services that would just never be because really they were never useful to begin with. Anyways, found this very interesting article. Billionaire and tech pioneer Mark Andreessen, right, who is the CEO of A16Z, right, one of the biggest shitcoin funders who recently tried to, I'm going to call it Bitcoin washing their industry, right, because he's investing in Lightning, so to me he's Bitcoin washing. Anyways, so here we go. Tech pioneer Mark Andreessen says crypto industry rhyming with rise of the internet. Interesting. How so? Let's dive into it. The co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz says he's never before compared any new development in tech to the rise of the internet until now. This is the only time I've ever said this is like the internet. If you go back through all of my historical statements, I've never said it about any other kind of technology. I've never said it about anything else between the original internet and then the emergence of crypto. Because I just wanted people to know, like, I don't take the comparison lightly. Andreessen explains that beyond the technology itself, blockchain is bringing together many of the world's greatest minds to solve problems and defy critics. I would agree that Bitcoin is doing this. I would not agree that a slow public database that companies can't really use is doing this. I'm sorry, you're just not going to convince me of this. But I get it. You've got a narrative to sell. So I will proceed. Andreessen, whose venture capital firm just launched, here we go. This is why it's like the internet. Here we go. Just launched a $4.5 billion digital assets fund. Says that Web3, nice. Web3 is bringing trust and economic utility to the internet. So right now, there's been zero economic utility. This is what I'm understanding. Zero economic utility. There's no trust right now. Web3, this centralized piece of crap that is mostly funded by Andreessen Horowitz and other VCs like his, they're what's going to usher in this trust and the economic utility to the internet. Got it. All right. Something that was missing in the late 1990s. Interesting. He mentions the late 90s. What were we missing? The other side. We were therefore missing trust, authority, permission. We were missing the ability to transact with people for trusted relationships, transact, send money, store money, and then have all the other economic arrangements that the world wants to have, such as loans, contracts, and insurance, and all of these other things. The way I think about it is Web3 is bringing trust to an untrusted network. I can't even believe I'm reading this. I honestly don't see, like, really, he's parading for third parties and he's parading for centralization. Okay. We could actually imagine the entire global economy running on the blockchain, like 30 or 50 years from now. Everything cuts over, and what would it mean for that to happen? And how would people have to feel about that? That's a very different kind of problem than the one we had. That's right. Putting all of the power into the technocratic elite is not necessarily the best idea either, especially not a very small handful of VCs. Now, let's go back. He talked about the early 90s. How is he so certain that this Web3 bullshit is going to be so big, right? It could be. It could just be because he may have been there. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at some of the big internet brands of the 90s. Now, I know most of you are going to, probably realize that you know these names because they're still around today. All right? Let's dive into them. Alta Vista, right? Everybody uses Alta Vista today. That was amazing. What about GeoCities? Everyone's hosting their sites there? That was a fantastic tech out of the 90s. Now, again, I'm not bashing the fact that they existed. It's fantastic that all these things existed, but make no mistake, none of these things were changing the world. All of these things were tiny little incremental steps that were never going to become the big idea, okay? Ask Jeeves. And now, let's take a look at Netscape. A really good look at Netscape. A brainchild of now legendary Mark Andreessen and Jim Clarkson of Silicon Graphics, the Netscape browser beat Microsoft to the market in 1994 after intense browser wars detailed by Engadget. Netscape's release of the source code spurred the creation of Mozilla. AOL bought Netscape from the dot-com bubble price of $4.2 billion in 1998, though it ended up costing $10 billion. As Firefox gained prominence, AOL made several attempts to revive Netscape's popularity, but eventually stopped supporting it in 2008. That's right. And then the last one on the list here is ICQ, which no one remembers either. So, my point is, he understands the boom of the 90s very well. He was there to capitalize on something that did not exist, vaporware. I used Netscape. It was an awful experience, okay? There were two browsers back then. None of them made sense. And you know what? He sees the same opportunity today in Web3. And this should tell you everything about vaporware. Anyways, that's my take on this. Your thoughts, Nico, before we go to Zach.
Dude, he was part of a failed, .com. I remember Netscape, right? I remember those companies, but the matter of fact is he was part of a failed, .com era company. That's just the reality, and here he is doing the same crap. And at the end of the day, he had an exit. He got out of that. Very similar to how Mark Cuban made money, right? Mark Cuban sold it was like a radio online thing at the top of the .com boom, became a billionaire, and that company just went to crap. And it's funny because both Mark and Mark Cuban, both Marks, are selling dog shit once again. But I guess this era's .com boom. And of course, they're completely ignoring Bitcoin, because in Bitcoin they would have equal footing to everyone, meaning it's a lot harder to scam people. So yeah, Mark, why don't you send me a Bitcoin? I'll send you 2 back.
Nice.
Anyways, Zach, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was definitely going to mention Mark Cuban too. He's sort of like in my mind, the poster child of dumb but lucky coming out of the .com era. And like Mark Andreessen, I think, is like considerably smarter than Mark Cuban, but they both definitely got lucky with basically dumping a lot of bags at the top of the .com bubble. And I think a very strong analogy there with A16Z drawing comparisons to the internet era. And I don't know, some of those A16Z portfolio companies are doing so hot right now, like Solana. The chains just stopped. Early internet, maybe that comparison actually is stronger than we give it credit for. But yeah, I don't know. I think maybe you guys said this, but some people, actually Jack Dorsey, started firing shots along these lines a while ago. Like Web3 is just a big A16Z portfolio company. At the end of the day, like you will be hard pressed to find a company that they don't have, or that they haven't been, at least part of 1 or 2 rounds in. So maybe you should just start calling it Web 16Z instead of 3, and a little bit more accurate naming there. But yeah, look at all those logos, like all these companies, and I'm sure there are some they don't even have on this portfolio page, but just ridiculous. They're in every fundraising announcement. VCs can be ruthless. I don't know how decentralized it is when you have one big backer backing all these projects calling the shots in many cases, and not my cup of tea. Like maybe to be a little bit edgy here, like if your thing is like crypto investing and speculating, like it is still like pretty Wild West and like off the hook a little bit. Like yeah, sure, go gamble if you want, but don't pretend it's anything more than that, really. So yeah.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I'm sorry. I just want to say to Zach's point, right? It's all about not being disingenuous, and that's exactly it. It's that people just need to realize that when you are putting your money into this stuff, you are indeed gambling. Like it is pure speculation. Investing is really just educated speculation. But this is I think that this is even one step further back from that, because as much as you think, not you, but as much as a person thinks they're being educated about investing, at the end of the day, let's be honest, when you buy one of these tokens, you get no guarantees. There's no legal ties for these corporations. Like, to me, it's really not investing. It is pure gambling and speculation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, for some people, that's a thrill. For other people, I'd say most people, like, they have no business doing that. And I think that's part of where, Bitcoin shines. And not really a huge fan of we don't need to get into that, but like Bitcoin definitely shines differently from all the other cryptocurrencies, because all of them are, at the end of the day, different ways of gambling, whereas Bitcoin is obviously a savings technology. And those are two just like diametrically opposed product offerings. Now, unfortunately, they are still sort of like seen in this big sector of cryptocurrency altogether. But, like a little bit below the surface, they couldn't be more different. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the unfortunate part, right? Is that companies like A16Z, they market it as if they're the equivalent. And the example that I always give is Solana Labs actually sent BitVolt Mining, which is my company, hey, do you want to do a partnership with Solana, right? And it goes back to the partnership parade, because they would like you to think that they're legitimate, and the way that they do that is they get celebrity endorsements or established companies to back them, right? And that kind of gives them this illusion of legitimacy, and unfortunately a lot of noobs get wrecked, which is exactly why we do the daily fail on Simply Bitcoin, right? But anyways, it's a good time, Phil.
The Daily Meme Review.
Brought to you by Citadel 21. They make the best Bitcoin cultural zine. It's stories, articles, comics by actual Bitcoin plebs. And every volume has different artwork. This is the artwork for volume 11. And this is the artwork for volume 2. Volume 1 is already sold out because they only make 1,000 physical copies per volume. So get your prints, your physical prints of Citadel 21 today before they run out. Guys, welcome to the daily Bitcoin meme review. We review Bitcoin memes in this narrative trench warfare that's being fought in the battleground of the internet. Memes are freaking artillery. Let's get to it. Here is Vitalik.eth, the shitcoiner of the shitcoiner. Remember that you should always test your DApp with at least one non-MetaMask wallet, Brave status browser, and make sure that your DApp conforms to Ethereum standards. That's funny. Like, what standards? And not just to accidental properties of one particular wallet. Anyways, of course, we got a fellow pleb. Money doesn't matter, rich people. Looks don't matter, attractive people. Proof of work doesn't matter, people who pre-mine. Very good. Shout out to the pleb. Okay, anyways, legendary Lena, she makes awesome memes. Shout out to Lena. Overseas transactions, gold, cash, Bitcoin, gold. So you want to spend money overseas? Please answer these questions first. Gold customs. We require further information before we can approve your transfer. Finally, gold. Because it was heavy. Please allow 3 to 5 business days for this transaction to be processed. Bitcoin. Wow, Lena. Shout out. Exactly. This is something that we've been describing for so long, but this picture perfectly encapsulates it. Anyways, moving on. Oh, this is our meme. Shout out Winekiss. Simply Bitcoin. Them when you're explaining sound money, when someone brings up dog coins and monkey JPEGs. Very good. All right, moving on. By Rothmus. My daughter asked me what taxes are like, and so she could understand, and it went to the kitchen and ate 46% of her cookies. Highly accurate, highly accurate. Taxes are theft. By the legendary Labrahodl. Bitcoin is slow and not private. Buy my shitcoins, Bcashers, Lightning Network Taproot. Very good, very good.
They've been trying lately. I saw some tweets, right, Roger?
Keep trying. I don't know.
Some pictures of
what happened to Roger? Like, he capitulated, and then he came back. He's like, let me just give it one last go, see what could happen. Anyways, next one by Jason Williams. Bitcoin, when I started, we solved the Byzantine general's problem and created a global decentralized currency. Crypto, stablecoin, 69% interest per month is absolutely accurate. This is very accurate. I mean, this is the power of memes, right? They're so effective at communicating information quickly because they're based on universal truth. Anyways, for those memes, Philip and Zach, I'm going to give this Lucio Paletti, artwork, but guess what? Yeah. It's signed by Lucio himself. So it's a postcard. Check it out. But it's actually signed. Shout out Lucio. He's a friend of the show. Anyways, Phil, what would you give those memes?
That is a very deep and awesome score, I might add. All right, so for my score, I am giving it this awesome, still in mint, in the box. That's right, Stranger Things. What is it? It is the Surfer Boy Pizza, but it's the t-shirt.
Very nice, very nice.
What did you think of the new show, by the way? Did you the new series? Did you watch it?
I love it.
It's good. Much better than season 3. Season 3 was like, and then this season picked up again. So, anyways, Zach, what would you give?
So I can't go get it, but I have, if you can picture a perfectly ripe pineapple sitting on my counter that I'm about to chop up. That's what I'd rank these memes, especially the one from Jason on Bitcoin when he started Crypto Now. That's pretty funny. And I love that meme format. So,
boom. Yeah, I'll pop up a pineapple. That's a very good score. Never gotten that before. Phil and I used to get fruits a lot, but none of those fruits were pineapples. It's a very delicious fruit. There's different ways to cut it. I know some people healthy. Just pluck it out. They pluck out the individual. Have you seen that?
Really? I've never.
It's crazy.
No way.
You know how there's the hexagon? People plug out the individual ones and they just eat it.
No, I've never heard of that.
Craziest thing I've ever seen. But anyways, guys, we want to know if you agree with our scores, you disagree. Let us know down in the comment section. Rate the meme yourself. Let us know what that meme is to you. It helps us with the mysterious YouTube algorithm. Make sure to join our awesome Telegram group where you can link us some awesome Bitcoin memes to review. It's a pleb party in there. Lots of plebs posting memes and other stuff. And of course, make sure to subscribe to us on alternative video platforms like rumble.com and our personal favorite, bitcointv.com. It's important you do that because we do talk shit about the World Economic Forum and central bankers. But anyways, Phil, it's time for
The Daily News.
Brought to you by CryptoCloaks.com. They make some of the best 3D printed Bitcoin merch, like the famous 3D printed Bitcoin grenade toy. Comes in any custom color your heart desires. This just happens to be simply Bitcoin colors. You want it in Peter Schiff colors, also known as gold, you can have that, but you know it pisses them off because it has a Bitcoin logo on it. They also make the famous Bitcoin Honey Badger. Comes in 3 different sizes. You could also put your hardware wallets in there. Really cool stuff. A bunch of other 3D printed Bitcoin merch. And you can take advantage of the promo code down below to get 5% off anything off the Crypto Cloaks online store. All right, so a lot of mining news lately that we've been covering, and we have Zack on the show today, so it's perfect to cover these topics. Kazakhstan expects at least $1.5 billion in economic activity from really Bitcoin mining. It's really Bitcoin mining. The vast majority of that, I would say 99% is Bitcoin mining, but of course it's Cointelegraph. So, anyways, let's check out the article, shall we? A report from the Data Center Industry and Blockchain Association of Kazakhstan, or NABDC, estimated that cryptocurrency mining could bring $1.5 billion in revenue for the country over the next 5 years. Currently, corporate digital currency mining activities generate about 98 billion teng, or $230 million per year in the country. This is a quote from the NABDC. The figure of $238 million is just an economic effect from companies that are officially involved in mining. If we take into account the gray miners, then this figure can be safely multiplied by 2. Now, this is what we've been talking about for many, many months now about the economic incentives of Bitcoin. Remember that the reason that Kazakhstan has so much economic activity of mining is because of the infamous China ban. And a lot of those Chinese miners, where did they migrate to? They migrated to Kazakhstan. So when we say, when New York State banned Bitcoin mining, or when China banned Bitcoin mining, we always say, you guys have fun staying poor. This is what we're talking about. Bitcoin, if you self-custody Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners, they're not location specific. They don't have to be in a certain area. All they need to find is cheap stranded electricity. There's cheap stranded electricity, even if it's in the middle of the Sahara. I guarantee you in 10 years, you will find a pleb there with an S9, right? That's just how it is, right? That's the economic incentives of Bitcoin. But check this out, the economic incentives of Bitcoin, and we covered this, but we're going to talk about it again today because Zack actually wrote a very good article, and I wanted to ask him about it. The economics of Bitcoin are so strong that even after China did this giant clusterfuck of a mistake that's going to cost them trillions of dollars, Chinese citizens are still mining Bitcoin underground. But according to this article, right, there was a sudden reemergence of the Bitcoin miners in China. But like Zack pointed out, that wasn't sudden. They always stayed there. It was just the way that they were reporting it that seemed like they disappeared and then they came back, right? So, Zack, a couple questions, right? What do you think of Kazakhstan? Why did they get the data on China wrong? Why, like, what were those miners always kind of in the gray? I know they weren't industrial miners. I know the industrial miners did actually leave China. That's what caused the hash rate drop. But why did they report it wrong for so long? If it's still estimated between 10 to 20% of the hash rate is still located in China, even though the last time I saw, if you get caught transacting in Bitcoin by the Supreme Court of China, it's like 10 years in prison, some crazy number. But yeah, that's the economic incentives of Bitcoin, right? China bans Bitcoin mining. That economic opportunity moves to a friendlier jurisdiction. They win. China loses. But even with the Chinese government still putting pressure, the Chinese people still want to mine Bitcoin because the incentives are so strong. So, Zach, what are your thoughts on all that? And why did they get the reporting so wrong?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think Kazakhstan is kind of like a very interesting case, like in the tailwinds of all this China stuff, because as you mentioned, a lot of miners did migrate there. In addition to, obviously like different parts of North America and even parts of Latin America and, pretty much everywhere else in the world. But a good chunk of it went to Kazakhstan. And then sort of over the course of the 6 to 8 months after the China ban, the Kazakhstan government was like, all right, that's like kind of enough. And then basically what they did is like set a cap, and like everyone who's here can stay here. And if you want to build new mining farms, then you like have like, I think they limited to like 1 to 10 megawatts or something. And then they just the other week published like a very formal list of like reporting rules and all this stuff. So like, and they also revoked some like tax incentives for miners that previously existed. So like Kazakhstan today is definitely a much less friendly place for miners than it was, even just a year ago. But there's still a lot of hash rate there, and a lot of miners left China to go there. But there's a non-trivial amount of miners who kind of got screwed twice because they left China and then they went to Kazakhstan, and then all these rules were implemented and incentives revoked. And now they're looking for a third place to relocate to. So I guess the moral of that story is there's always unpredictable like geopolitical risk for mining wherever you end up. And obviously like Kazakhstan isn't like a full crackdown like China. And, something like that probably is very unlikely to happen in somewhere like North America, US and Canada. But, there's a non-0% chance that it could happen anywhere. So like long term, the most nimble miners will always win. And that kind of brings us full circle to like the hash rate in China now, because those are the type of miners that are still online in China, the smaller scale, very nimble, much less easy to detect. And like you mentioned, the big industrial scale miners, they had no choice. They had to unplug and either relocate, or a bunch of miners in China just opted to put their machines in storage and sit on their thumbs basically and like see what happens. But Steve Barber from Upstream Data talks about this a lot. He's a huge champion of like the home mining ecosystem, which I love. And he, beats the drum a lot on, the small scale at home nimble miners are the ones who are, sorry, I don't know if you could hear that. There was a horn back there. He champions a lot the small, nimble, at-home miners who can outlast and are much like harder to detect than. And I love Riot and Bitfarms and all these guys, but they're not exactly like the most nimble mining setups in the world. So the point is like the hash rate that was in China has always been there. And what hash rate is that? It's small scale mining operations. And maybe like a small sliver of it is like politically tied, and people are just getting favors and looking the other way, and but I think that's probably not a huge part of it. And there definitely was not like a huge resurgence in hash rate there because well, there's several reasons. I kind of outlined some of the big ones in, like you mentioned, an article from Bitcoin Magazine. Mostly just I got fed up with people like trumpeting this data everywhere, like 0% hash rate in China a year ago, and now like boom, 20%. Like, okay, did China like reverse their ban?
It was always there. It was always there. We were saying that too, Phil. We're like, yeah, it's there. Oh man.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop rambling there, but like there's a lot to unpack. It was reported wrong. There's lots of good reasons why the hash rate is still there. And those miners are the ones who, like, if they can survive that full crackdown on China, those are the types of miners who can survive anything. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it highlights, right, the mobility of the Bitcoin network and how this concept that I always kept telling you guys, how it moves the balance of power from the state to the individual, right? And I think that those nimble miners, like you said, Zach, in China is a really good representation of that, right? Especially with the consequences as there are. And I remember I reached out to a buddy of mine who lives in the mainland, and I said, hey, and I actually said this on Unconfiscatable as well when we did the panel together, Zach. And I said, hey, aren't you concerned that they're banning Bitcoin mining? He's like, he doesn't say dude, but he's like Nika, which is apparently how you pronounce my name in Mandarin. He's like, Nika, they've banned this 5 times. You know, what doesn't kill the honey badger makes it stronger. And I was like, what? They're using the same language? What's going on here? So anyways, Phil, I know you've had experience setting up an S9 at home. So what are your thoughts on all this, my friend?
Yeah, no, so you know what? I really enjoyed that experience. And like I told you, Nico, if nothing else, I think it's worth it to at the very least, set up an at-home miner, get it connected to a pool, and run your own miner, look at the stats, get to know the Bitcoin network from that aspect. I really, when Nico would tell me at the beginning, you really need to see it from the aspect of a miner, it's completely different. And it's true. You don't really have that full, I personally did not have that full appreciation for the entirety of the Bitcoin network without setting up a miner. That being said, to Zach's point, the home miners are really underestimated, and the nimble miners are resilient miners. And that's really why I think they are underestimated. It's because people just look at big farms, right? Like at the end of the day, a lot of times people just think bigger is better, the more machines you have and all this stuff. But look at what China proved. Or again, because we didn't have clear data, what we believe that China proved is that these nimble miners could just simply get up, move operations, keep things going, and that says a lot, again, for the resilience of the Bitcoin network as well. So, yeah, I'm very, I wouldn't say that I'm surprised that hash rate came back online, because, again, we're not really sure how much of it was really lost, but I think it's interesting that reporting came out. Because the Chinese government looks at news from outside, right? So I wonder what they think of this news, or are they the ones running those miners?
Oh man, I don't know. I definitely some of them. I don't know. Anyways, so Zach, we've been covering this topic for a couple months now, and actually we covered it as it developed, right? And now it's getting to a point where we believe, and we asked Natalie Burnell this question as well. She gave a very political answer, in my opinion, where they're clearly using the environment as a social attack on Bitcoin. It's happening all over the world. Let me pull up some examples so you guys could keep up. Thankfully, the ban attempt in Europe failed. The European Parliament's Economics and Monetary Affairs Committee has rejected efforts to ban Bitcoin and other energy-intensive crypto mining in the region. And I love how they try to set up the narrative, right? Energy-intensive. There's no nuance there, right? Bitcoin mining doesn't use energy that was already being used because it would be too expensive. Bitcoin mining uses energy that was already going to waste, stranded energy, right? If not, you're going to get priced out. You're going to get priced out by more efficient miners, especially during bear markets. So not only in Europe did they try to do this, they also have successfully done this in the state of New York. New York, just like China, have fun staying poor. But anyways, New York State Assembly has passed a bill establishing a 2-year Phil, Nico can't read. What the fuck does that say?
Moratorium.
Thank you. On new proof of work crypto mining operations unless 100% renewable energy is powered. Now, here's the thing, though, okay? This is why I don't believe this part. First of all, why are banks not put on the same standard as Bitcoin miners? Why do Bitcoin miners have to be the ones using 100% renewable energies, where we know for a fact that Bitcoin mining in general, the entire industry, is more green and environmentally friendly than most other industries? So why is it set at such a high bar? And I think this is the smoking gun, but I don't want to jump to any conclusions. I want to get Zach's input to this. This is the Norwegian Bitcoin mining ban. Luckily it was struck down as well. But what was interesting about the Norwegian mining ban is that 100%, this is just the entire electricity generation in Norway, 98% is by renewable energies. In Bitcoin mining, 100% of Bitcoin mining is powered by renewable energies, but still, they wanted to ban it. Which makes me call bullshit on the New York one. And again, put the politics aside, but this is a factual observation. Coincidentally, it's all left-wing parties in Europe, in Norway, and in the United States. What's going on there? What is going on there? And that's something that we've been asking ourselves a lot, Zach, because we covered it. First it was Europe, and we're like, what's going on here? Then it was New York, then we're like, what's going on here? Then Norway was the smoking gun. 100% of Bitcoin mining in Norway is powered by renewable energies, but they still want to ban it. Why do you think that is, Zach?
Yeah, it's definitely it's sort of like a whack-a-mole game for Bitcoin miners, at least, in terms of responding to criticisms and objections, because the facts and data are always on our side, and there's solutions to pretty much any problem they can try and articulate in different jurisdictions. But if it's not one thing, it's another. And regulators and policymakers there are definitely some who are big supporters of Bitcoin economy and the Bitcoin mining sector. But lots of people just like to hate Bitcoin. And I agree with your point a lot of, Bitcoin kind of being singled out. Like if these standards are being held, if Bitcoin mining is supposed to be held to these energy consumption standards, why not banks or even just large data centers who definitely aren't running on, a majority of renewable energy most of the time? Why just Bitcoin mines? There's really no good answer to that question. People just like to hate Bitcoin. And I think a key strategy for sort of overcoming that is focusing on the other two letters in the ESG, which is often the main thrust behind these attacks. Everyone focuses on the E and the environmental impacts, and there's lots of good answers to all those different criticisms. But Bitcoin easily wins the social and the governance aspects also. And if we focus on those a little bit more, then, we can sort of start to outweigh the E, and then, it just puts Bitcoin in a much better light for people who take these things very seriously and believe, ESG is the holy grail of business operations and all this stuff. Bitcoin's great for society, has huge social benefits, and just sort of redefines so many different things with individual governance and financial management. And we also win the E, but that's sort of the big consensus hot button issue. And if we can just check the other two boxes as easy wins, we have a lot more weight behind us to win the E also. So just my 2 cents, I guess.
Absolutely. I agree. Phil, thoughts on this, my friend? Are they doing it maliciously? Is it about control, Phil? What's going on there?
They're evil and they're scheming. No. Okay, so look. Yes, that's right. They're twirling their mustaches and they're doing nefarious things on purpose. Okay. That's awesome. Okay, so look. In all seriousness, ESG is probably the biggest, the most kind of underhanded attack that I have seen on human freedom,
on capitalism,
and capitalism, on human minds, on the human will, whatever you want to call it. It is this invisible boogeyman that no one can stop. Sorry, boogie person, right? We don't want to offend anyone. Okay, the invisible boogie thing that no one can stop, that everyone must adhere to, because if we don't, we're not going to be safe, and the world is going to end, and it's going to be chaos. Okay, it's the craziest thing I've ever seen, and I can't believe that people are buying into it. But it's just completely nuts. Now, my question is this, okay? Because this is what they're going to do. They're going to force Bitcoiners to innovate so that we get to the point in New York where we can safely say that Bitcoin is entirely 100% powered off of renewables. What happens then?
It's already proven in Norway. They don't give a fuck.
Nico, but look, you have to understand, it has to be proven in New York.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a locality. Dude, locality matters, okay? When you're trying to dismantle something and you don't have any facts behind you, all these little things, they matter. So my question is, what happens then in New York when we can show that 100% number? What's the next goalpost? And that's what I'm not sure of, because the ESG, like I said, ESG is already the big bad invisible anything.
You know what? I tweeted this out before we get to the brain stuff. they want to get to decide what energy you can use and what energy you can't use, and that is really what it's about. And I think Norway's a good representation of that. I think that the 100% renewable thing is just a smokescreen. But again, that's just my opinion. Let's see if we can confirm it. Anyways, we have Zack on the show. We want to talk about this. This is the famous Brains OS. If you haven't put this firmware on your miner, you are most likely slightly mining for Bitmain, most likely. That's pretty much everyone knows that. So Zack, what is Brains OS? Why should people put this on their miner? Why should they update their miner with this firmware? What are the benefits of it?
Yeah, for sure. If you're not running Brains OS, you're definitely at least having less fun than other miners. But I agree.
And some of it is going to Bitmain.
Yes, so that's part of the appeal of Brains OS. Brains OS is basically custom open source firmware that can replace the stock firmware on your Bitcoin mining machine, which is not open source. And so, Bitmain can, and like not exclusively Bitmain, but I mean they do have a little bit of history. But any miner you buy from any mining machine manufacturer, their firmware is almost guaranteed to not be open source, and you're basically just trusting them not to, add anything fishy with how your machine operates. And
which they definitely have in the past.
There are a couple very, very notable incidents in the past where people just kind of, and some of them, don't even have like rock solid proof. Like next thing to it, yes, but like because the firmware isn't open source, people have just kind of discovered these like backdoors and other things added to the firmware, and the mining industry is like, all right, wait a minute, what is Bitmain doing here exactly? Anyway, open source is almost always better, and Brains OS is open source. You do have to install it on your firmware, and the tricky thing is, every type of ASIC, every different generation requires basically starting from scratch because of their unique design and rebuilding a new firmware product basically all the way up. So Brains is constantly working on adding, more firmware product to their library. Next on the list is for MicroBT, what's miner machines that everyone is asking for. But anyway, the high level benefits are you can increase performance, and you just have much more fine-tuned control over how your machine operates. So if the noise is unbearable, or if it's using too much power, you can control both of those things based on a variety of metrics like time of day or heat emission or whatever. Or you can overclock it and have more heat and more hashes per second, and more Bitcoin as a result. So you basically just get to set variables that control different things about how your machine performs, and it's open source, so you can review the code, both of which are huge wins. But the key disclaimer is that it's not available for all types of ASICs yet. But at the top, or like earlier in the show, I guess maybe towards the middle, we were talking about like everyone should, and I love that you guys advocate for this. Everyone should like make the spend of like $200-300, buy an S9, which is an older type of machine, obviously, kind of like the AK-47 of Bitcoin miners. I think the Boom Racks has started saying that a lot more. At least they were the ones I think invented that reference. It will run all the time. It's a great starter, and you do get the great hands-on experience of like the infrastructure part of the Bitcoin network, and you can take it apart, see if you can put it back together again, run it for a little bit, and along the way, maybe install some custom firmware to get that next level experience of home mining. Also, so many things you can do with mining, but buying an old cheap machine and plugging it in, taking it apart is, the absolute best way to get started. So yeah, if you take that path, definitely look at the Brains OS docs and figure out how to install it on the machine and level up your home mining experience. Yeah, that's the shill, I guess.
Absolutely. I definitely, that's something that I've always advocated for. People reach out to me. It's like, Nico, I want to host with you. I was like, dude, like, buy your own miner at first, buy it, plug it in at home, run it, see how it feels, and then let's talk, right? Mining, especially if you're doing it yourself, has a very high learning curve, my experience. You definitely make a lot of mistakes, so you definitely want to start with an S9. Just get you dip your toe in the water, you'll get a feeling. You'll be like, I like this. You'll be like, maybe not so much. And yeah, so definitely get your feet wet, and you could install custom firmware like Brains. Anyways, let's talk about Slush Pool. Apparently, I didn't know this until I read it on the website. It's the world's first mining pool. You guys have mined more than 1.25 million Bitcoin since 2010. That is absolutely bonkers. I don't use Slush Pool personally myself, just because some stuff that I won't say on air. But I'm a big fan. I've heard many good things of Slush Pool. So, Zach, why should people use Slush Pool? What's the deal with that? I can't believe you guys have been around for such a long time.
Yeah, so Slush Pool is the world's first Bitcoin pool, Bitcoin mining pool, and they mined a lot of Bitcoin. Brains was incorporated.
Hold on. Let me back up. Give the audience some context. I apologize. What is a mining pool first of all?
No, yeah, great point. Good context there to add. A mining pool is basically kind of like what the name implies. Like, it's just a bunch of people pooling or aggregating their mining activities together, and trying to solve blocks together, which the result of that is, you have a higher probability of solving a block and, claiming the reward, and then everyone who participates, shares it, typically, depending on how there's different ways you can structure how you share payouts and how the pools are structured. That's a high level idea. The alternate scenario is you just sort of mining by yourself with however many machines you have, which in most cases is kind of referred to as lottery mining, because the odds of you actually solving a block are very, very, very low. But if or when it does happen, you get all, at this point, 6.25 BTC. So a little bit more of a gamble. And for businesses, mining pools definitely sort of smooth out that variance with revenue and block rewards. That's a pool. And Slush Pool was first, created by a guy who goes by Slush. Now he makes hardware wallets. But Brains was incorporated a couple of years after Slush Pool started, and then they sort of acquired Slush Pool, or just added it under their umbrella. And no hate for you not using Slush Pool. You can still use Brains OS Plus without mining through Slush. We'll still take your dev fee for using our firmware. But yeah, Slush is great. Great pool. It is. It's kind of the pleb pool. We definitely have a huge, maybe even over 90% of the pleb mining market uses Slush, and a huge amount of off-grid miners also mine with Slush. So those are two pretty nice feathers in our caps. But lots of great pools out there. And at the end of the day, pools are kind of all the same service. The other stuff that pool companies or companies that offer a pool, the other stuff they offer is kind of, what makes or breaks them. And in our case, things like firmware and mining data tools and other stuff. So yeah, Slush is great, first mining pool, but definitely not the only cool thing that Brains has to offer.
Very, very cool stuff. The only reason I don't use it is because I get a deal on my miners if I use a specific pool. I won't mention which one it is, but you could probably surmise which one it is, Zach. Anyways,
okay.
Phil.
That's one of those things that pools use to to boost their business. Totally okay.
So, Phil, any closing thoughts, my friend?
The only thing I can really add to this is saying that I did install the Brains OS when I got my S9. And I have to say that I got awesome support from your team. And it was a really great experience. And my miner was up and running in, just a few hours after I asked for help. So it was really cool, and it was a great experience. So for me, from the home mining, right, the mining, at-home enthusiast, I was going to say that it was a great experience and absolutely worthwhile.
There you go.
Awesome. Love to hear it. Home mining can be, as I'm sure you guys know, can be a little bit intimidating, and it's not as easy as using an air fryer, I guess. But there are some steps to go through. But you might be surprised how simple it is for anyone watching if you actually take the dive and buy a machine, plug it in, play around with it. Not the easiest thing in the world, but probably easier than you're expecting.
There you go. And now thanks to Phil, now you guys know you could reach out to Brains, and they'll be more than happy to help you out. But anyways, Phil, there was an open source software release today. Why don't you tell everybody about it?
software releases. Brought to you by CipherSafe. Check them out, ciphersafe.io. Print is dead. Store your seed in the Cipher Wheel or the all-new Cipher Grid. They both come with a tamper-resistant wire, and the grid also comes with a punch tool. All right, we've got all new SeedSigner OS. That's right, you could install the SeedSigner OS directly on your Raspberry Pi. We've got the link to that down below in the show notes. Guys, don't forget to check us out on our audio-only platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. If you want to stream us sats, check us out on fountain.fm. You could stream us sats through Breeze.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. All right, guys, before we go, I want to give a very special shout out to our clothing sponsor, RepresentLTD.com. Phil and I wear the hoodies every single day. They're also making Bitcoin merch and Simply Bitcoin merch. And good news, you can take advantage of the promo code down below to get 10% off anything on the RepresentLTD.com store. I also want to give a very special shout out to our awesome guest. You can go give him a follow on Twitter at Zack Voell. He works for Brains. He is the only U.S. worker for Brains. That means he must have a lot of brains. Haha, there's a dad joke. Anyways, guys, that was our show. If you enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Smash that like button. And of course, you want to continue hearing the Bitcoin news from the pleb perspective and the catastrophic fails from the same perspective. Definitely consider subscribing to Simply Bitcoin. And we'll see you tomorrow, guys, for a brand new episode.
To quote our awesome guest, lots of people just like to hate Bitcoin.